Because legacy isn't about assets. It's about connection. It's about lineage.
The unspoken, unknown really becomes, for lack of a better term, a cancer within the family. It really divides the family.
Whatever you are avoiding is ultimately going to come out if you don't handle it and manage it head on. Nobody wants their dirty laundry aired out in public.
And reframing the conversation from death, dying, disabilities to empowered by being able to make those decisions while we can versus having them being made for us.
Legacy is often framed as paperwork, wills, trusts, documents that get signed and forgotten. But what if legacy isn't what you left behind? What if it's how you live?
Wealth that has been accumulated has been very, very hard fought in a different way with a variety of sacrifices, sometimes sacrificed by one's life.
For families of color that need to really consider protection of assets and what makes it that much more important for a family who has maybe never experienced that kind of wealth before, and why naming your values, your stories, and your intentions might be the most powerful act of emotional generosity you're ever going to make.
That really began to completely shift my focus to legacy planning. I felt like I had something to share.
Behind every opinion, every conflict, and every moment of courage, there is a human story longing to be understood. I'm Dr. Payal Beri, and this is Reframing Perspectives, a space for conversations that help us see ourselves and each other with more honesty and curiosity so that we can build empathy and compassion in our world. Here in these episodes, we're going to explore the layers of what it means to be human in leadership, in society, and in our everyday lives, and how by understanding those layers, it can reshape our relationships, our communities, and our impact. So let's step inside and let's begin. My guest today, Lisa McCurdy, is the founder of The Wealth Counselor and Defining Legacy Group. She has spent nearly 2 decades helping high net worth families navigate wealth, generational transitions, and the emotional, psychological, and relational layers that money always brings with it. But here's what makes Lisa's work revolutionary. She doesn't treat legacy as a transaction. She treats it as a celebration of who you are, what shaped you, what you want people you love to carry forward. In this conversation, we talk about why legacy matters for every family, regardless of wealth. Lisa, welcome to Reframing Perspectives. The conversation that we're about to have is something that you actually really woke my eyes up to. And the idea about legacy and what it really means when we think about legacy planning, when we think about our future, because so much of that in my head, and I think a lot of people's heads, is focused on death, on what's going to happen after I'm gone. And it's that discomfort of conversations about like what your parents are leaving you, or that thing that you don't want to talk about with other siblings of who's getting what. And there is a lot of uncomfort where we don't want to go through that emotional piece, but you reframed this from a place of empowerment and celebration, and that it's actually not as much about the money as it is about the family experience. So I'm just so excited to dive into all of this with you today.
Great. I am so looking forward to talking about my favorite topic.
So Lisa, I'm a firm believer that every person who feels so passionately about the work that they do is because something happened in their life that really influenced them to bring this out to the world. So I'd love for you to share, what was that moment for you that made you realize, oh my gosh, this needs to be something that every family needs to understand?
Picture me a few years out of law school, enjoying the career that I'd always hoped for in international relations, diplomacy, doing work overseas in Southern Africa, Zambia, South Africa. I mean, I can't even fully describe the experiences that I had and how rewarding. And I always thought that I wouldn't practice law traditionally. I would use it for something ancillary like diplomacy or business relations or something like that, transactional work. But I came to be aware of an elderly uncle who was suffering from dementia. He was nearly 60 years my senior, and I was to some degree called home to serve as court-appointed legal guardian of this elderly uncle. And he lived for another 8 years. I served for another 8 years. And what I, instantly knew was nobody who had the right information would want to be declared incompetent in open public court, just so that their family would be able to legally and officially be able to assist them as declined when they needed a little bit more assistance, especially when a relatively few documents, preparation early on, identifying trusted individuals, appointing those with all the formalities could help you completely avoid this. So that was kind of my launch point that really began to completely shift my focus to legacy planning. I felt like I had something to share. And that was really the catalyst, realizing that the necessary information or the way the information was presented for some reason prevented or wasn't welcoming enough for even the most educated, very thoughtful individuals to move forward and do this relatively painless planning. So I knew it needed to be reframed, and I felt like I was the one to do it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you've built an incredible career helping so many families see that. And what you said there, though, really touched on something, is that nobody wants their dirty laundry aired out in public. And what I'm really hearing is that if you don't take the responsibility and the preparedness of taking the time to nurture what it is that you have going on in your family, the legacy that you're building, creating, nurturing, then that is going to be the case. And so it's almost like whatever you are avoiding is ultimately going to come out if you don't handle it and manage it head on.
100%. It shows up in the family dynamic. And, I was speaking with someone earlier today about this. And though our focus typically is with the higher net worth individual, 10 million plus in assets, these are the same issues that everyone's dealing with. Every family deals with, regardless of net worth. The relationships, the unspoken and unsaid elements of that relationship, the labels that, we put on each other as family members, and sometimes we get stuck in those labels. The questions we have, especially if there's a family that doesn't talk about money or doesn't talk about, mental health, or doesn't talk about, a variety of different things, such that there are always these questions in the back of our heads and no place for our voice to really live in connecting with our families in a deeper way. And we tend to come up with our own ideas about what things mean, the why, when we don't have these conversations, when we don't have this open dialogue, when we don't have facilitated conversations, and we can't be intentional about kind of getting past these types of issues. But they show up. They'll show up absolutely during times of illness and concern, and certainly death and, confusion around that. Sometimes times of great wealth, so inheritance. I was speaking recently with a new client, and she received a surprise $10 million in assets from her father, from whom she'd been a bit estranged. He is a famous, well-known sculptor, and she just really hadn't been in touch with him. And she and her two siblings each received $10 million from a trust that her great-grandparents had put in place. Her father was the final beneficiary of the trust, and then it distributed. And first, she said she pretended as though she hadn't received it because there was so much emotion built into whom she received it from and the relationship that they really hadn't been able to develop, that she felt almost maybe a little guilty accepting the assets. And, now, unfortunately, her father's gone and she can't have the conversations that she hoped she would have had. So, there are many circumstances, many points along the legacy journey where it's very helpful to be able to have deep conversations with family.
Wow. Can you imagine getting 10 million out of nowhere and from someone that you thought that you'd never speak to again. And now they're gone and you can't even have that closure conversation. You can't understand it. So what I'm really hearing is that this legacy journey is so much more about an emotional journey than it is. And the numbers and the assets and the material piece of that is just the outcome of what it is. But what I'm really hearing is like, there's a lot of energy, there's emotional energy that's being held in this stuff and in this work. How do you help navigate that for a family that is, for example, for her and, having to navigate, if I'm going to accept this, then what does that play into the role of my family that I have, my immediate family? Do I share this with, how do I manage this wealth if I've never had that kind of wealth before? How do I share it with my kids that I'm trying to raise in a way where they don't get spoiled by money or by privileges? Like how do you navigate that?
You have open dialogue. So you create spaces where conversations, productive, respectful conversations can occur. Many iterations of that. This might be as part of a family reunion or as part of another celebration. And then other times facilitated and very intentional and, kind of much more structured. But having those conversations, not about the things, but about the values and principles, the wisdom that reconnects us. It's always wonderfully surprising when I typically start with listing values and asking each to choose their top 3 without discussion with the other family members. So often the same values and principles are chosen. And this might be between siblings who really don't see themselves as close, or, a remote cousin, because we're typically not just working with the nuclear family, we're also working with multiple arms of the family tree around common vision. But it's amazing to them. And it's just that one point helps to begin reconnect them and make them feel as though, well, maybe we can work together. We do have, some similar perspectives and goals and we can be successful.
That's really beautiful, like bringing that values in. And I know that one of the things is that when you even think about values, and even though they may be talking about education as a value, or they're talking about philanthropy as a value, that it's important for them to give, but they're behaviors that align with those values may be different, and then navigating that. So even though they believe in education, it may not mean that they believe in distributing some of their money to educational universities. It may mean that it's about that every member of the family must get a graduate degree if you want to be a beneficiary of the trust, right? So how do you help them with recognizing and navigating that piece of coming together on what is our actual definition and how are we defining these values that are going to then ultimately make the decisions of what we're doing with our built wealth and generational wealth?
I would say kind of 3 areas of focus. First, recognizing that there's living legacy, so that impact that you're making during your lifetime, and lasting legacy, so the resources you leave behind. But also there's individual legacy planning, and then the collective. So kind of those 3 tranches, and allowing for, the most creativity when you're speaking about your individual resources, and being able to be, very specific with respect to those intentions. But, working together in a team with respect to the collective can be very impactful. I mean, you can really create a movement when you are working together toward a common vision. Maybe you're impacting your entire community. Maybe you're impacting your entire family tree with seed money to get advanced education or to start a business or something else. But each of those tranches allow for some degree of coming together, but also really being able to sound one's own voice. And both are very important, I believe.
Yeah, you bring up all of these pieces of compromise, essentially what I'm hearing, and coming together, and you're working with different personalities, you're working with different visions, you're also working with different generations. Something that I know that you've shared, through your many writings, your book, and everything that you share in your work is that it's so important for that communication between intergenerational and seeing the value of everyone. Because in my eyes, and I think in a lot of people's experience, it's typically that, oh, it's the eldest generation that's working on the legacy piece. And then you find out, surprise, here's what you get, here's what you don't get, only after they're gone. And now there's bitterness. I mean, I've seen it so much in so many families where families have literally broken apart because of fighting over property. And it's so sad because it's like you're literally ruining your relationships because of a piece of land that you're going to be one day gone too. It's like, what are you doing? But you talk so much about that. This is why legacy needs to be a full family conversation, connection, and a celebration. And I want to hear from you directly about why that matters so much.
Well, it matters because without these conversations, we'll all make up our own ideas about things. And at least 50%, probably much more often, we're wrong. That can actually permeate many other areas of our lives. The family is our foundation in everything that we do, and we want to be able to thrive in a lot of different ways. But, kind of circling back to the family itself, the unspoken, unknown really becomes, for lack of a better term, a cancer within the family. It really divides the family. And, unfortunately, it can really disrupt any possibility of successfully navigating the teamwork that's really necessary to make maximum impact in the community. You're right. It's not about the money. It's often not about what we think it might be about. And so it's so important for us to open up, have that dialogue, provide an opportunity for the matriarchs and patriarchs to fully describe their intentions, receive feedback, be open to questions, and then the kind of sandwich generation to have an understanding of the responsibility they're going to have in helping to navigate some of those decisions down the road as their parents age, but also receiving a level of comfort and peace of mind that they are empowered with this knowledge, that they're not guessing their way through the process, provides just a lot of comfort and reduces the fear of mistake that a lot of the standard generation are dealing with. And then with the younger generations that are often left out of these conversations, but certainly have something to offer. It might be with respect to innovation. It might be with respect to just a different perspective and a different angle of looking at things. At some point, they're going to be the leaders of the family. It's better to prepare them early, allow for adjustments, maybe even mistake, while there are mentors who can be nurturing and helpful to get things back on track, but also mentors in the room who are open to new ideas, fresh, and the family is the better, stronger unit for embracing that diversity.
What I'm really hearing again is just so much of that. There's value in each generation if we start to really respect that of what each generation brings to the table. Then there's a sense of, would you say that there's like a sense of even comfort and safety for that eldest generation to feel like, okay, I feel like I have empowered this younger generation. They have the responsibility, they understand it, and I feel a little bit more at peace knowing that everything that I have worked so hard for this family now is in good hands.
Definitely at peace and ready to pass the baton. We find that those who are a little bit older, who either haven't planned or who haven't shared their plans, usually is rooted in more unknown. They don't know if they're ready. They don't know if they're interested. They don't know and don't know how to approach their children any more than their children know how to approach them.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that. Again, it's like you're working like a therapist as much as you're working as a lawyer in these settings.
It's true.
It's really looking at the role of empathy that you also play in helping to navigate those conversations and helping that. I'm curious, though, that I know you, of course, work with like high net worth families. And like you mentioned, this is something that every family should be considering and thinking about and looking into, no matter what it is. Even as someone who doesn't have kids, it's like then thinking about, well, what do you do for your medical health? And I think that sometimes people forget that legacy at planning isn't just just about, do you own a home? Do you own property? It also means about what happens to you in the hospital if you're subconscious or unconscious and you're in a coma or something happens, and who becomes that decision maker for you?
Trusted individuals to implement your plan. That's key. And it's not who I trust. It's who you trust with respect to your decision making. Those individuals you could identify who will make decisions the way you would make decisions about yourself, not the decisions that they would make for themselves. So that's really a true fiduciary who can remove him or her perspective, their wishes, their own desires, and really focus on what the individual they're supporting needs. Those are the individuals that need to be brought to the table and to be able to assist during any time of incapacity. We want to make sure legacy addresses each kind of iteration, each component of our lives. So as we move through our lives, things change, as they should, and we need a different set of resources. We should be intentional about those and reframing the conversation from death, dying, disability to empowered by being able to make those decisions while we can versus having them being made for us, similar to what I was describing with my uncle. That really matters. We know that there are loved ones who will volunteer, who might not be ready for the role. And so oftentimes I'm having conversations with some clients who want to name, all three of their children to make decisions. So one, it's a lot of people making decisions. Two, if they don't make decisions together well, then that's not a good plan. Three, if there's one or two making financial decisions, but they call every month for a loan, that's probably not a good decision. And so, but there are other roles for them. So they need not feel abandoned. They need not feel, unloved, but we have to have these conversations, and they don't even have to be so exposed. They can be quite, positive. Oh, I think you'd be wonderful for this role, without describing why they wouldn't be great for another role. But having those conversations versus just naming the other children and leaving the one child, kind of out of all decision making, then things get sticky. They've got to figure out or tell themselves the story that they come up with. And it's often not accurate. And hurt relative who doesn't feel heard is really a challenging component of any legacy plan. It just takes one or two for things to be a bit challenging. And so these conversations can reveal those opportunities to kind of set the record straight, to work through conversations. So it's not about the money, it's about the resources and the achievements we want to make collectively as a family.
Yeah, there's in those pieces, as you're talking about this, I know that one of the things that you teach in your program that you've launched and Legacy Makers and the work that you do within that is helping families actually identify their board of advisors that are separate from the legal team of advisors, where you have a estate planner, you have a financial advisor, you have all of those pieces, but then looking at who are the individuals within the family. And I know in the past when I've, spoken to you and connected with you, you've talked about it from a place of it's no different than succession planning in companies.
Right.
And so thinking about that, you may be besties with your cousin and you love everything that they are, but one of the things that you joke about is, but they're always chaotic. They never know what they're doing, but that's what I love about them. And you're like, and that's why but they're my best friend and I love this cousin. So they're going to be in charge of managing the financial piece of this, right? So it's that piece that it's really understanding and being able to remove the emotional piece of it to make those decisions. But how does a family member make that decision? Say like, all right, Lisa, even though you're my favorite cousin, you don't have a role in this piece.
Well, with our help. we can help them to communicate that. And, alongside that, identify another role for that cousin. That person might be fantastic hosting family gatherings, which also helps the family to reconnect. Oftentimes, clients will, for instance, if there's a special needs child or adult, and if you have special needs, it's important that you don't receive asset at a level that will reduce or eliminate your ability to receive certain governmental benefits. They're benefits that can't be purchased. So it's not as though you could be given more money and then purchase the benefits. They're needs-based, financially needs-based. So you want that loved one to be able to appear that way. But you can establish trusts that don't count as the individual's resources that would provide supplemental care, such as making sure that these individuals are able to participate in family celebrations, family trips, and that sort of things. That's where those resources would go. So there are ways to address and include everyone, even if they're not identical or the same.
Wow. There's so much that goes into this. Can you share like an example of like a successful legacy stewardship, what it looks like emotionally, relationally, and what you've seen it like a family that's gone from this place where they've had discomfort in what they're engaging in. And then through your process, they're really found that connectedness with each other and celebrating what they have.
I worked with a family, and this is just one, but this one just continues to warm my heart, and we've been working with them over the last 11 years or so. They came to me because the matriarchs and patriarchs, somewhat elderly, but not that far advanced, 11 of them owned land together. And their children and grandchildren were adults living around the country. Not only did they own land together, but they also had a business together. And they expected their children, grandchildren to want to be a part of this business, want to come home, come back to the kind of family land and reclaim their portion, their share. I helped them to, over initially a series of days and then a number of years, because we continued to do some work to first understand that that proposition alone wasn't realistic. Their children and grandchildren had built families, careers elsewhere, and to just drop everything and relocate home, as much as they respected the opportunity of owning land there in the family plot and respected the sacrifice that had gone into developing and providing these resources to each family member. It just was unrealistic that they would be able to just close up shop and move their families back. What we decided to do, and there were about 40 family members of different generations that we needed to navigate, at least in this first iteration, but many, many more. We designed an apprentice program so that those in the family, wherever they were in the country, who had an interest in returning and working in the business, would commit to one of their 2 weeks of vacation to return back to the family, work in the business in the role that they were interested in. They'd be mentored by the matriarchs and patriarchs and other founders. They'd be introduced to some customers and vendors, and both would be able to determine whether they indeed wanted to serve in this role and could commit even more so. And the matriarchs and patriarchs could observe them, mentor. Maybe it would be determined that it wasn't a good plan for this particular individual or these individuals. Over about 9 years, several of the family members took the patriarchs up on this offer, went through the apprenticeship program, and 6 family members relocated to work in the business. They actually expanded to some other businesses that were ancillary to this. And, they were able to claim their share of the land and work in the business. But it showed that, there was a way to achieve what they wanted to achieve. They wanted younger generations to celebrate the sacrifice and embrace these resources that had been so hard fought, but they were able to do so without disrupting, their lives in their families' lives in a much more kind of methodical, organized manner that respected everybody's interests and everybody's perspective.
Wow. Hi, friends. I have a favor to ask you. If you're enjoying these episodes, then I'd really love it if you could subscribe, leave a review, or share it with your friends and family. Your words help others discover that the stories and these episodes exist in the perspectives that we're exploring over here. And the more that we can grow, the more feedback that we get from you through those reviews, the more we can make sure that we're creating meaningful episodes that you want to listen to. You have no idea how much this helps and how much I appreciate you for doing this. So if you don't mind, whether it's following us, subscribing, hitting the button below, if you can leave a review for us, or if you just share this with your friends and family, the episodes that you think that they would really resonate with, it means more to us than you can imagine. Thank you so much. It just shows the way that I love the fact that there was an apprentice program that was built in. It's almost giving people the opportunity to see that, is this the path or not, before having to make such a big life decision. And what it sounds like, it is also giving people the empowerment to actually say and give a choice of how involved do you want to be a part of this or not. And then that ultimately will decide on what that creates for you as a family member and what that means for you. It gives ownership, and it also gives that, what's that word I'm trying to think of, is
Really, it's kind of a sense of purpose.
Yes, it's a purpose and permission, right? There's permission. And that's when, every time, Lisa, I've talked to you, like, that is one of the biggest things that just really keeps coming up, is that level of ownership and level of permission that someone can feel that they have as a part of being a part of this family. And again, one of the things that I know that you are just really committed to shifting the language around is that this is something to feel proud about. This is an opportunity to feel empowered and celebrate what you have, instead of seeing this as an uncomfortable situation. It's more about, look at the lineage, look at what we've created here, and let's celebrate this.
I think
and
your
bringing
plan
all of that
should be
together.
a memoir of your life, just something that you're very proud of, that you have really expressed your kind of individuality through.
Yeah. So I know that this is something that you feel really strongly about, and you've seen this over and over again, and it's worked for the families that work with you, where they see that addressing it, having those conversations, conflict resolution. And what it sounds like, it's bringing those people back together.
Yes.
And there's like a soul connection now, that the family doesn't feel like, oh yeah, I've got relatives. It's more like, no, we are this. There's a sense of pride behind the family, that and the family work that they have, the purpose that they have.
That's absolutely correct. Yes. It really makes everybody feel as though they have contributed in their own unique way, and that their perspective, even if a recommendation isn't chosen, at least that they've had a platform to be heard and to really examine, a number of different things. I think, I've also shared with you that there typically is one, maybe two individuals in the family who takes on this responsibility. And most would think it's, the eldest member of the family, but that's not necessarily so. Often maybe a member of the Sandra generation, or even one of the younger individuals who is just respected by her nuclear family, multiple arms of the family tree, male or female, but often happens to be female in our experience. And, she has either been chosen or she's taken on this responsibility herself. She carries the load of helping the family navigate these issues, making sure that they come together to discuss them, understanding where everybody is in their legacy journey, and helping them to kind of find their path to memorializing, their plans and their perspective and their goals. She often weighs in on or funds or assists with the planning of family gatherings and celebrations. And more recently, I've established a cohort for these individuals. A very, kind of intimate space where they can not only, kind of learn from me and my experience, but also learn from other cohort members, really build community with others dealing with the same circumstances. The, goals of making sure the family has impact in the community in the most positive way, maybe even helps to kind of shift and create movements in a particular direction, helps certain family members to navigate, challenges, just over ensuring the family thrives in every way that they can. And this person, however, is often not supported herself. She is there to assist in every way, always shows up 100%, if not more. And, it can be lonely in that space and a little frightening because, there's potential for loss and misstep and mistake for a human. So this cohort not only helps with kind of strategic direction, but also the emotional aspects of managing at this level and the responsibility of those outcomes.
Yeah, I know you've talked about this, and I find it so not surprising, but at the same time, that piece of each person is going through this, each woman who takes this on, their weight is on their shoulders. And oftentimes they carry this weight because they are that hyper independent person. They are the type A. They are the executive in their company. They are used to taking charge. They're doing so many things that they feel this identity of being the responsible one. And now the family has also treated them as that. And the family has treated them as, Lisa's going to be the one to take care of that. We don't have to think about it. Lisa will take care of that. And the pressure that gets put onto this individual. So to have a cohort where now I can meet other women who are going through that same experience and we're collectively figuring out how to navigate that. But what I really love that you have set up and what you're doing is that even though this one person is the coined responsible person for the entire navigation of this, but what you're talking and what you've been sharing this entire time is the fact that you're even teaching that one person who is taking ownership over it on how to share the ownership and how to bring it back into the family so that they don't feel that everything rests only on them and that if they make one mistake, then it's failure and doom everywhere, which is not great for their mental health.
Exactly. And there might be another family member willing to help. They might not have revisited that recently. There might be a younger adult who's come of age who's very interested and has some wonderful ideas. So the cohort will assist with that, especially alongside a facilitated multi-generational family meeting. Those two together will truly empower the family and make them stronger, all heading in the same direction.
Yeah, it just sounds so. It's what I really also am hearing is just like it's a cathartic release to be a part of something like this, where you can be in a community that finally you're not the only lonely one handling it, where no one else understands what you're going through, but you have that support system to navigate it. You have someone to bounce ideas off of, to know what it is, but it's still not. It's individuals that are going through the same thing, but they're not in your family, so you're able to have a little bit of that disconnection, third perspective of like, what do I bring back in? And what I'm also really hearing is just that there's that narrative and identity shift that happens, right? Where the individual who's carrying this in, and as you mentioned this earlier, is that everyone has this perspective or has a narrative in the family. That's the lazy one. That's the party one. That's the responsible one. That's this one. And those narratives could be something that are held from 30 years ago, but we haven't given them the grace that they've grown up or they've matured into something else. They've pivoted. And it sounds like that is something that really gets addressed in this program.
It really does. And it must, because those are dangerous assumptions and dangerous labels. They can really impact one's life, and especially when they're embraced by the individual and they're just not accurate and untrue. When they're embraced by other family members as well, that can impact all of the relationships within the family. I recently described things this way. So I was speaking earlier this week to a group of family offices at a summit. And I got a question after I spoke about communicating across the generations, respecting and recognizing the various communication styles, in recognizing those, kind of reshaping and reframing certain conversations so that information can be received by each generation in the most positive way. And then using all of that work to be able to build a stronger family toward common vision. And I got a question. One gentleman stood up and said that his family had a family office. He was one of the leaders. They have strong governance documents. I said, well, that's wonderful. And he said, so doesn't that, take care of all of these issues? The family dynamic is controlled by that. And I said, well, think about it this way. If you think about current circumstances, not being political, but certainly the United States has strong governance documents and doctrine. All governance documents require the individuals who are being managed by them to embrace them and respect them. So the human behavior, the human condition, the family dynamic plays a role in the success of this infrastructure. Without the buy-in, without the respect of the individuals who are being, kind of monitored and governed by the governing documents, the strategy and plan doesn't work. So you have to address kind of both. Certainly you want to put the infrastructure in place. You should have a great estate and asset protection plan. That helps not only to guide within the family, but outside of the family. But you must also address what's unwritten, or oftentimes even the wealthiest families are rebuilding in generation 3.
Wow. I love that example that you gave and comparing it to, the Constitution and comparing it to this, because you're right. I think of it, being an academic nerd, I think of it as you learn all the stuff in textbooks when you are in school. You learn all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, that's all great in theory until you put it in practice. And then we all come out into the real world and we're like, but I learned that in the textbook. And you're like, well, that's not how the real world works.
It's supposed to work just like this. So what's happening?
Right. It's like we almost like we sell this as a utopian, idealistic idea, but humans are complex, humans are messy, and we are the emotional beings that are navigating a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of celebration in life. And I'm curious, Lisa, that we talked about a lot of the time the anchor ends up being this high-powered individual woman who manages this. But one of the things that I'm also curious about is that as families are navigating this, or as someone is coming into wealth, as someone is starting to even think about this, because we don't think about this as before we start building assets. It's like usually afterwards, we're like, oh, now we have to think about protection. But what is it about also, and why, for families of color that need to really consider the protection of assets, and what makes it that much more important for a family who has maybe never experienced that kind of wealth before, and now they're coming into it, but there's a lot of narratives of their cultural nuances that may come in the way?
There are. There are reasons why, communities of color don't trust some of the, the infrastructure, some of the systems, some of the processes and procedures. And oftentimes wealth that has been accumulated has been very, very hard fought in a different way, with a variety of sacrifices, sometimes sacrificed by one's life. Similarly, or alongside that, there are communities of color that aren't receiving the level of information that would be most helpful, and haven't historically received that. So, I liken it to exercising a muscle. If you have the necessary details, information, strategies, and infrastructure, you also have the team of advisors, financial, legal, accounting, etc., business etc. And you have, kind of like-minded members of, I'm going to say cohort, quote unquote. So others similarly situated that you've been able to bounce ideas off of, friends, family, colleagues. Then you have, if you and your family have had those types of relationships over decades, you're stronger for it. Certain strategies and plans are, kind of happenstance, second nature. If you haven't been exposed to those things, then you're still learning. Like with any other set of new information strategies, that muscle just isn't that strong. So it's really important that, all families, but certainly communities of color, are very intentional about outcomes. What types of resources they want current and future generations to have and what's going to get us there. And it's more than just investing wealth. It's more than just memorializing our plans in writing. It includes the family dynamic and incorporating each and every member into implementing the strategy. And there's really, truly a role for everyone.
Wow. I think that part right there is that being empowered by the education of knowing that this is available to you. You are able to have it, and then working through that narrative of, this was never something that we're supposed to have. This is not supposed to be that we're not supposed to be in this group. And that uncomfortable feeling as you're growing into that space is such a powerful one. So Lisa, I have one final question for you. And I want to know that for someone who's listening, who's thinking that, legacy, I understand this, it's important to figure it out, but, I still don't necessarily see it as something beyond, I don't have the assets for it yet. So do I really need to be planning legacy for me? And how do I really see this as a celebration? Because it just makes me so uncomfortable. How do you reframe legacy as a mode of celebration for someone who's still struggling with the idea that they really do have a responsibility towards it?
If you have loved ones you care about, if you have anything that you care about, so meaning assets, it could be at home, or maybe it's an heirloom that's been given to you if you're still renting. But if you care about, any loved ones, if you care about assets, if you care about your community and causes, it's important for you to memorialize your wishes in writing. The burden of a mother or a father who has an adult child who isn't well, who would like to be able to support them by helping to make decisions, by ensuring that their finances stay on track while they're recovering from an illness. It is insurmountable when they have not been given the authority to assist their child. One set of planning that we do is for the new college student going off to college. They may have just turned 18 and they're suddenly an adult. Now their parents can't automatically manage their health care and financial decisions. They may be going off, multiple states away and find themselves ill, and their parents won't even be able to gather details of their medical issue without authority. Now, medical facilities will try to find some close relative, to have some level of dialogue, but it's the difference between being beholden to that medical authority who decides to give you just a bit of information for the hospital or medical facility to make certain decisions versus your parents, your other loved one being empowered to demand to be able to care for you in the way they know you would want them to do. So you may not even have a home, but maybe you're focused on healthcare, transferring the authority to manage your healthcare during some time of incapacity.
Wow, Lisa, that really, it just took me back because you're right. Like an 18-year-old is technically legal, but as a parent, you don't emotionally think of them yet as an adult. Right. They're still maturing. I mean, your brain isn't even fully matured until it's 25, so developed. And so that quick switch of recognizing that how are you still still going to remain involved? How are you helping your 18-year-old start to become a responsible, prepared adult and start to see that as this isn't just about me, myself, and I have this freedom now. It's about looking at it as there's a sense of responsibility that comes with being a parent, an adult, a individual. And if I want to be a contributing society, part of the society, it also means how am I showing up in my family?
That's right.
To uphold those values. So Lisa, thank you so much for coming on to Reframing Perspectives and helping to share why legacy making is so much more than just signed documents. And it truly is a journey of a family's experience together and a family's story and the empowerment that every generation can really see and feel from this. So I just want to thank you so much. And I'm so excited to, know that your program is out there because this is definitely one of a kind. Like I've never heard of a program like this before. And I think it's just so critical that people start to celebrate their legacy and start feeling empowered by it versus feeling in conflict of it.
Exactly. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. As I said, it's my favorite topic. I do love to share. I shared my kind of serendipitous story of how I got here early on. And I really established initially the firm and now our consulting company to educate the community, to provide, to share my knowledge of, how families can navigate these issues and feel stronger and better prepared on the other side of them.
Absolutely. Lisa, how can people find you? How can people connect with you to learn more about your thought leadership, of your perspectives, of your value? You've got so much abundant information and resources. I know that. And how can someone find you and how can someone find out about the program that you have?
You can find me easily on LinkedIn, Lisa McCurdy. You can find me at lisagmccurdy.com. The cohort is described there and links to other social media. You can find me on Instagram as Lisa G. McCurdy. So I'm pretty accessible. Feel free to reach out, message me, DM me if you have a question. If this work resonates with you, happy to help you and your family. I am here to serve.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa, so much. I can't wait to hear more and see more of your work and out in the world.
Well, thank you so much, Payal. I love the work that you do, and I'm just honored to be here. Take care.